Hey Internet, one of the best things you can do to become a better artist is open yourself up to critique. Critiques are a time-honored tradition where artists present their work to others for scrutiny and analysis. However, it is important to note that critique is not the same thing as criticism. It's not supposed to be an abusive or mean-spirited experience. That being said, critiques are not always the most pleasant. One of the harshest ones I received came from a professor at Berkeley who said, and I quote, "Your use of color is very pedestrian." The critique cut straight to the bone because I knew my professor was right. My use of color was very pedestrian, and frankly it still is. I've just learned to embrace it. But it took me a long time to feel comfortable working with color again. Color has just been something I have always struggled with. I had so much doubt about my grasp of the subject that at one point I wondered whether or not I may have actually been colorblind. I'm not, but still, my confidence had been shaken, and the mild anxiety I had about using color became such a distraction that I gave up on working with it altogether, focusing almost exclusively on black and white imagery for about a year or two. And I'd probably still be working in black and white if it weren't for the other critiques I received, commenting on how gloomy and depressing my paintings had become. And I don't consider myself to be a very gloomy or depressing person. I am, for the most part, pretty upbeat, so there was a serious disconnect between what I had intended to communicate with my work and how my work was being interpreted by others. Which is never a great feeling as an artist because it means I'm doing something wrong. And I don't mean to imply that my work was being misinterpreted despite the intention behind its creation, because the person providing the critique is never wrong. The work needs to be able to stand on its own without intervention from its creator to justify its existence. All that is to say, through critique, I was able to recognize that my work wasn't coming across as genuine to me. It didn't feel like my voice. Something was missing, and that missing element was color. So where did things go wrong? How did I manage to get all the way to the college level in my artistic career with such a poor understanding of something as fundamental as color? Well, it might have to do with the fact that all the color theory we are taught in school seems to begin and end with the color wheel. And as such, everything we are taught about color is a lie. At risk of sounding like a hypocrite, I must confess the color wheel has been an invaluable tool in the classroom as an art educator. So perhaps calling it a lie is a bit of an exaggeration. It isn't necessarily wrong in and of itself because it does accurately describe a certain color space. It's just an extremely oversimplified visual aid based on an 18th century knowledge of optics that ignores our contemporary understanding of the physical and biological processes that produce the sensation we call color. Don't get me wrong, Sir Isaac Newton, inventor of the color wheel, discoverer of gravity, and father of calculus, just to name a few of his many accomplishments, was certainly a brilliant man. But let's not forget he once stabbed himself in the eye for science and fancied himself an alchemist in pursuit of the philosopher's stone, which, to his credit, might be an unfair criticism, since chemistry as we know it didn't really exist at the time. But my point still stands. Despite his brilliance, his ideas about the true nature of reality were far from perfect, and so was his color wheel. So what's wrong with the color wheel? Well, where to begin? I'm sure everyone is familiar with the colors of the rainbow: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. But not everyone is aware that Newton's observation and choice to divide the spectrum of light he observed when passing sunlight through a prism into 7 distinct colors, rather than say 5 or 9, was influenced by his belief that there were hidden divine mechanisms that structured an orderly and logical cosmos, and the 7 colors of the rainbow were arbitrarily selected to be analogous to the 7 notes of the chromatic scale in Western music. And no, it had nothing to do with synesthesia, though he probably was familiar with the phenomena known as color hearing, a concept that dates back to Greek antiquity. Rather, it was a case of Newton falling prey to his bias and seeing a pattern where none were to be found. In order to make his ideas about color work, he labeled blue twice by wedging indigo into the spectrum. Indigo has since been demoted from the color wheel, hence why today in art classrooms across the world you will only see 6 colors, the 3 primaries and their secondary complementary counterparts, which I suppose is an improvement, but still not entirely accurate. And don't even get me started on tertiary colors. If secondary colors are called secondary because they are a combination of 2 primary colors, by that logic you think tertiary colors would be a combination of 3 primary colors, but that's not what's being taught. Furthermore, the very notion the colors red, yellow, and blue are the primary colors is, as Albert Munsell put it over a century ago, mischief and a widely accepted error. Truth of the matter is, there isn't one set of primaries that can be considered the canonical set. Red, yellow, and blue define one type of color space or gamut, but it is by no means the definitive color space. For example, if you've ever owned a color inkjet printer, I'm sure you've encountered and been frustrated by the cyan, yellow, magenta, and black, or CYMK color space. And the electronic device you're watching this video on right now uses a combination of red, green, and blue light to reproduce the various colors that can be found in my studio to a relativistic degree of accuracy. And contrary to popular belief, the idea that one can produce all the colors from just 3 primaries alone is not true for any of the color spaces previously mentioned. After all, the human eye can distinguish between 1 million different shades of color, and our ability to see color is an extremely complicated biological process that can't be summed up by 3 colors alone. So why is so much misinformation about color being disseminated by well-meaning educators? Well, it really comes down to the availability and expense of usable pigments. Red, yellow, and blue pigments are just more readily accessible and were in wide use long before we understood the science behind color. For most of human history, we've had to rely on organic or mineral-based pigments extracted from the world around us. It's only within the past 200 years or so that advancements in chemistry have given us synthetic dyes and pigments, expanding our scientific knowledge of the subject and widening the gamut of possible colors for artists to choose from. And it seems art education, with its preference for teaching tradition and history, just hasn't really caught up yet. Ultimately, the red, yellow, blue color space is popular because it works for most applications and has for centuries, but it is by no means the end-all be-all of color theory. When artists and scientists talk about color, they are really talking about 2 different things. The artist is more concerned with the sensation and psychological effects of color and how to use it to communicate mood and meaning. The scientist, on the other hand, sees it as an objective, physical tool for measuring and understanding the world around them. It might be challenging to wrap your head around, but color is not actually a real thing. It's a property of light, and the thing we call color is merely an abstract byproduct of how our brains interpret the various wavelengths and combinations of light we encounter. It's a powerful tool for an artist to have in their toolkit that is packed with psychological symbolism, and one that I don't yet feel I fully comprehend. Perhaps one day I will, but if not, that's cool too. At least I can have confidence knowing I know very little.